Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a university counsellor and two students, Joseph and Cara. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi Joseph, how are you today?
Fine, thanks.
And Cara, how are you?
Good.
As we discussed on the phone earlier, I wanted to speak with both of you about the subjects you have chosen to study and how you are managing your time. Okay?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, so I'll start with Cara. You've been here for how many months now?
I've been here for 6 months.
How are you finding it?
It's good. I'm enjoying the course.
And what about life outside? Are you making friends and socializing?
Not really. People here are quite closed. They don't talk to you.
I see. So, what do you do after classes?
I usually go home and study, and I might go out for a walk, but never really with anyone. Sometimes my roommate Louisa comes with me, but she always seems to be busy.
How is this affecting your schoolwork?
I don't think it is, but I miss home.
Cara, what I suggest for now is that you look into joining one of the social clubs on campus. There are a variety of them. You can go camping, skiing, snorkeling, painting, dancing, reading, horse riding, rowing. There's a list on the school website. Have a look and work out which one you're interested in and which suits your timetable. You'll meet friends that way and people who have the same career interests as you. As for the subjects you've chosen for a career in microbiology, I think you should look into dropping one of your subjects and picking it up again next year as a minor. You have a lot on your plate, and this will just cause great pressure. It doesn't mean that you aren't coping, but you're doing about 10 hours more than the average student a week. Think about it, and we can make another appointment to discuss it. When are you free?
I have an hour free usually on Wednesdays at 11:30.
Okay, good. Come to my office at 11:45 and wait in reception. Okay?
Okay, I'll see you then.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Joseph, how are you finding the university?
I love it. It's very different from home. Life here is very much focused on study and also socializing through sport. People have been very friendly and curious about my culture.
So, you've managed to integrate well?
I think so. I've joined the rugby team, something I'd never thought I'd be interested in.
And how are your studies going?
I think I am doing well. I have a few assignments that need some work, but overall, I'm coping.
That's good. I'm happy that you're enjoying the university, but remember, don't let your schoolwork get too far behind, because it will pile up, and before you know it, you will be late handing in work. You know that there's a penalty for handing in work late?
No, I didn't.
You would have been told at the start of the course, during orientation.
I don't remember.
You need to remember these things. They are very important. You might be an excellent student, but if you consistently hand in work late, you'll be penalised and you might end up losing your degree over it. That's a lot of years of work, okay?
Yes, I'll remember that.
And also remember that you have to attend 90% of your classes. So far, you have missed 5 tutorials. Be careful here. These could also cost you your degree. Is there any particular reason you missed these classes?
I'd been training for our rugby match the night before and, well, we went out afterwards and I slept past my alarm clock.
Joseph, I know this culture must be very different from where you come from, but please try and be a little more conservative with your time. I think maybe you should spend more time on your studies and less time on socialising. The subjects you've chosen are intensive. I want you to spend 3 hours a night studying before you decide to do anything else. I'll make an appointment to see you in a month and we can assess your progress. I'll give you my business card. All my contact details are there. Call me in 3 weeks to organise another meeting. Do you have any questions for me?
No, none.
Okay, I'll see you in a month.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear part of a tutorial between 2 students and their tutor.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Dr. Barrett?
Sammy, come in. Is Irene with you?
Yes.
Good. Sit down. Right, we're looking at how far you've got with your research project since we last met. You decided to do a survey about computer facilities at the university, didn't you?
That's right. We decided to investigate the university's open access centres and, in particular, the computer facilities. Lots of the students are having trouble getting access to a computer when they need one, so we thought it would be a useful area to research.
Good. Fine. It's not a topic anyone has looked at before, as far as I know, so it's a good choice. So, what background reading did you do?
Well, we looked in the catalogues in the library, but we couldn't find much that was useful. It's such a specialised subject, hardly anything seems to have been published about it.
And as well as that, the technology is all changing so quickly.
But the Open Access Centre has an online questionnaire on computer use that it asks all the students to do at the end of their first year, and the supervisor gave us access to that data, so we used it as a starting point for our research. It wasn't exactly what we needed, but it gave us an idea of what we wanted to find out in our survey. Then we designed our own questionnaire.
And how did you use it?
We approached students individually and went through our questionnaire with them on a one-to-one basis.
So you actually asked them the questions?
That's right. We made notes of the answers as we went along, and actually we found we got a bit of extra information that way as well, about the underlying attitudes of the people we were interviewing, by observing the body language and things like that.
How big was your sample?
Well, altogether we interviewed a random sample of 65 students, 55% male and 45% female.
And what about the locations and times of the survey?
We went to the 5 open access computer centres at the university and we got about equal amounts of data at each one. It took us 3 weeks. We did it during the week, in the day and in the evenings.
Not the weekends?
No.
So presumably your respondents were mostly full-time students?
Yes. Oh, you mean we should have collected some data at the weekends from the part-time students? We didn't think of that.
OK, it's just an example of how difficult it is to get a truly random sample. So, how far have you got with the analysis of results?
Well, everyone agreed there was a problem, but we're more interested in what they think should be done about it. The most popular suggestion was for some sort of booking system. About 77% of the students thought that would be best, but there were other suggestions. For example, about 65% of people thought it would help if the opening hours were longer, like 24 hours a day.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So, what other suggestions did people come up with?
Well, actually, the main reason why people can't get to a computer is because so many students are using them for personal emails or just surfing the web. So one solution would be to have some computer rooms for recreational use and some for people to do serious work in. The trouble is, quite often people do their work, then they want to check their emails, and it would be a nuisance if you had to get up and go to another room and log on again just for that.
Another problem is that during the day, tutors book whole blocks of computers for complete sessions, so several people said there should be restrictions on block bookings. But the trouble is, the classes need the computers. There's nothing else they can use. Some people said the whole problem would be solved if the university would just buy more computers, but other people said it might make things better for a bit, but it wouldn't really solve the problem permanently. You can't just solve the problem by throwing money at it.
And with the suggestion that the computer room should stay open round the clock, some people did point out that there'd have to be someone around all the time to make sure the equipment didn't get stolen, especially at night.
So a booking system seems to be the best suggestion?
Yes. Apparently some universities have a sort of queuing system. It means the staff at the open access centres have to organise it, but people say it works quite well. You go along, and if there isn't a computer free just then, you're given a numbered ticket, and then when your number is called out, you have the next available computer. Or it can be done electronically as well, but that's more complicated, and it isn't really necessary.
Good. So, now let's discuss.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will now hear a radio talk on agricultural regulations.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Could there be clearer proof of the arrogance and indifference of those who are supposed to keep our food safe than the muzzling of John Verrill? Agriculture is a business, true, and businesses have to make money. But this shows how ministers and officials put the profits of the agriculture business before the well-being of the British people. Mr. Verrill, a pharmaceutical chemist, was appointed to represent consumers on one of the many committees that advise the government on food safety. When he tried to do his job, though, and wanted to warn ministers of a danger to children's health, he was refused permission to do so. The danger comes from hormones given to cattle in the USA and some other countries to make them grow faster. They speed up the animal's development to maturity, thus making meat production more profitable. There have, however, long been fears that the hormones have horrendous effects on the people who eat them, causing diseases as serious as cancer. Once these hormones were used on British cattle too, but over 20 years ago they were banned in Europe for being too dangerous. Indeed, so concerned is the European Union that it banned imports of hormone-fed beef years ago, much to the fury of the US government, which wants to sell it all over the world. Several years ago, the USA and Canada asked the World Trade Organization to declare the ban illegal and to punish Europe for failing to lift it. The WTO, with its long record of refusing to let environmental or safety concerns interfere with trade, agreed, imposing fines of more than $120 million a year on the EU for its refusal to back down. The British government now backs the Americans, claiming that there is no proof that hormone-fed beef does any harm. This is where Mr. Verrill comes in. He is very angry with the government, especially as their claim comes out just after a Danish study shows that growth hormones are 200 times more dangerous than was previously thought. Worried by these findings, Mr. Verrill spoke to government representatives, who did nothing.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Not only that, but they have not been testing beef which is imported, which, by law, they are required to do. This directly affects the British public, as about 40% of the beef British people eat comes from abroad, supposedly from countries like Brazil, which does not allow the use of growth hormones. Brazilian beef is stocked by some British supermarkets and widely used in catering. Yet, when a Brazilian farm was recently visited by EU inspectors, a large stockpile of this banned substance was found. This is not the first food scandal we have had in our country. Take the present concern over a well-known chocolate company. Several months ago, the company found out that its sweets were contaminated with a rare form of salmonella, but they did nothing about it, leaving their sweets in the shops to be bought by the unsuspecting public. It was not until 5 months later, when several children had suffered food poisoning, that the chocolate bars were removed from the shelves. It makes you wonder how many other dangerous foods have been allowed onto our plates.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4. Listen to the conversation between Andrew and Samantha.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Does your work bring you into contact with many overseas students, Samantha?
Occasionally. As you know, a solicitor's work is to advise people about their rights when they have any problems understanding how the law operates. They may need help because of injury to themselves or their property, if they've been attacked or robbed, for example. But these are not by any means the main problems I deal with.
Really? We know more about crime, I suppose, because we read about it in the newspaper or see it on TV. What other things do people come to you for help with?
There are lots of things which don't get nearly so much attention. Sometimes it's to do with relationships in the community, as when bills aren't paid, or contracted work isn't completed, or neighbours disagree. At other times, it's to do with people not understanding the law and their responsibilities, and this is probably where overseas students have the most difficulty. One interesting example is customs laws, something which every new arrival has to come up against.
What is it that overseas students find most difficult to understand about Australian customs regulations?
I think it's a shock to many people arriving here for the first time to find out how many things are prohibited. Everyday food items, for example. I mean, when I've been travelling overseas, I've been quite amazed at the lack of concern in some countries about food being brought in from other parts of the world without any check.
You mean people arriving into other countries don't have to declare any foodstuffs at all?
In some countries, there are lots of warnings about drugs and firearms, and there are usually limits on alcohol and tobacco, and perhaps perfume. But food's not mentioned.
Yes, I suppose I never thought about it till I came here. You can take anything you like into England as far as food is concerned.
You see, here, you can't even drive from one state to another with a few apples and oranges for the journey. There are signs to remind you not to bring any fruit into some states, though they don't usually search your bags unless there's a fruit fly epidemic or something.
With those kinds of regulations between states, it's no wonder that they're so strict about what you can bring in from overseas. Of course, farmers would be wiped out if some pests were introduced which destroyed their whole crop. It's easy to understand why you should take steps to prevent that.
And with food being such an important part of many cultures, it can be difficult for some people to realise they're not allowed to bring in delicacies from home for friends and relatives here. I'm defending someone at the moment who has exactly that problem.
Oh, what happened?
It's an interesting case. Have you got time for a cup of coffee? I'll tell you about it if you like.
That'd be great.
That is the end of Part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.